is there some spark of something else that the human adds to their work or what they do that isn't just a matter of following out patterns, and therefore that AI can't replicate? Maybe not.
True innovation.
You know?
True innovation, right? Can right? Like, because in theory, if you're just recognizing patterns and applying them, you can never innovate. And that's actually one of the big fears, right?
These legs look too weird, crossed. Do they look really weird?
I just see the foot. I don't
Okay. Yeah.
I heard this interesting documentary on his life.
Paul Rubens. Yeah.
Yeah, Paul Rubens' life. I haven't seen it yet, though.
No, my sister recommended it to me as well, and it's on my to watch list because I've always liked. I mean, I really liked that show as a kid, actually, and that puppet. My grandma gave it to me.
Wasn't it also like less controversial his arrest than we make it out to be? Like, wasn't it like in a theater, pornographic theater? That was sort of like the whole idea of that was to do what he was doing. So what, like, it wasn't like, you know what I mean? Wasn't it something like that? Like, I don't remember the details, but
I think it's just the contrast between like a persona that is like kind of kid friendly and like caters to kids with like, I mean, you know, his humor was also adult oriented, but kid oriented, you know, with all the colors and things. And there's a lot of toys and all this. And then like at that time, maybe today too, it's just like you combine that with like adult sexuality in any form, even if it's perfectly legal or like, you know, it just becomes like, you know, this like crisscross, like people demand like purity from their children's entertainment.
But how like those former Disney stars, like Miley Cyrus is or whatever, and then they like they shed their child persona by anyways.
The Justin Timberlake of the
exactly the Justin
Bieber.
Timberlakes, right, and they very explicitly shed their Disney personas, and they're no longer viewed as child stars, and now an adult audience. I mean, interesting.
It's part of like the cycle of life, I suppose. So welcome to the Deadbeat Philosophy Podcast. I'm your host, Dave Baumeister, and with me today, it's my pleasure to say, is Thibaut Hennen. I've spoken with Thibaut before in the past, and the very first episode of this series featured a bit of that conversation, but the rest of our conversation was sort of eaten up in the cloud. And so I'm very happy to have Thibaut back again to continue, but now a couple months in the future, where the world has transformed radically. And so Thibaut, thanks very much for joining me again for this chat today. And maybe Thibaut, let's just start off. I'll ask you to introduce yourself to those listening and watching. Who are you?
Well, thanks so much for having me, Dave. It's great to be here again. And you know, we can talk a bit more about the cloud today as well. Maybe, and it was a deliberate attempt by technology to suppress our conversation. But my name is Thibaut. I work in policy in Canada, and I also teach at Concordia University, teaching the environmental assessment course, Department of Geography Planning, Geography Planning and Environment. There we go. I also teach in political science, and happy to be here and have a conversation and see where it takes us.
Wonderful. And maybe just like one thing to point out is that you and our paths first converged back in Eugene, Oregon, where we both did our doctoral work at the University of Oregon in different disciplines. And since then, we've moved to different places. But it's really nice to kind of have continued our connection and friendship over those spaces, which is nice. So,
indeed, you were helping me understand environmental philosophy back in the day and helped me teach it to students among many interactions. But yes, I've always appreciated.
And you helped me understand environmental policy and institutions. And I remember a project you had with regards to sustainable forestry. Right. Yeah. And maybe one with regards to washing machine pods and things, and the circular life cycle of these things. So very good, and I think complementary interests. So let's dig into that cloud, or let's like put our heads up in there. So in one sense, I know that you've been thinking about AI and its place in our society and where we're at with regards to that. Maybe from a policy perspective, I don't know if that's something you teach about or that figures into your research and such, but like lead us into that topic. Maybe like raise what one question might be, like what about AI is most interesting or alarming or, just attention grabbing for you?
Yeah, well, I think perhaps I'll start. Just from I ponder a lot about AI. I work with AI sort of in the everyday operations that I do, but I also work with AI policies and think a lot about them and AI ethics. My day to day is a lot of AI these days, in a lot of different ways. But I think for me, I sort of pondered a little bit about, the transitioning. Like I have many lines of thoughts, perhaps a little bit disorganized. So I think it's sort of interesting to talk with you as a philosopher, sort of organize my thinking a little bit. And on the one hand, I have a data science background, and so AI is really nothing new, right? It's like this extension of data science where you're running numbers, right? You're identifying a relationship, and then from that relationship, you make an inference. And that's not really anything new. And in fact, sometimes AI is being applied to things when I was in grad school with you, Dave, that we would not have called AI, right? It was a regression. It was an agent-based model. Like it was this category of playing with data to learn something, and you generate some inferences, and from there you could propose a decision or an understanding.
Yeah. And do you think then, like, what happened? Was it like with large language models and ChatGPT and such, like that kind of like received so much publicity, and that everybody's like, okay, well now it's here, AI is here. Whereas what you're saying is, I mean, if you actually look at what we're talking about and the data science, the algorithms, the analyses and things, obviously it's been a spectrum.
It's been around for a long time, but I think for me, what I sort of ask myself, and I go back and forth on, is like, where do humans fit in this? So hear me out, right? So traditionally in a data science, we would run our algorithms, right? And then we would look at the results, right? And the models, and we see the results. Maybe we tweak the models, we put in certain parameters, right? But we try to sort of get the best understanding we can with the data that we have. And then we'd interpret it, and then we take a decision. But the other day, my watch was vibrating, saying I needed to move. And you have to move because somewhere.
Were you wearing the watch, or was it like on
it's
the side
my
table?
smartwatch.
Okay, very good.
So my smartwatch was telling me I needed to move. I hadn't moved, and it's telling me all the time, about my performance, about my health, about what I should do, right? So then I get up and I move. Or I get up and I run a bit more, and it's telling me now's a good time to run, now's not a good time, how much I should run, how much I shouldn't run. It's telling, like, so all of a sudden, there's an algorithm somewhere, presumably was drawn from a massive amount of data that companies, I'm not saying the company names, but these companies have collected these data, and they've gotten experts to apply some theories, and now they put them into the watches. And so the watch is telling me what to do, right? Like the algorithm is dictating my behavior. Right. And now I'm responding. So I'm not like, it's sort of a weird thing where I'm now responding to the algorithm without sort of that middle part. And in some ways I thought, well, this feels novel to me. Like there's this tool that we've built, and I'm no longer like, it's the AI in charge here, right? That's telling me what to do. On the other hand, is that any different than, for example, other tools we've built that tells us what to do without thinking too much? The most basic ones would be like a calendar or a watch, right? Like I don't question my watch. It says it's 3 p.m. It's 3 p.m. I know it is, and I stop work, right? Or a calendar tells us when certain things are. It's drawn from data too, right? At some point we observed the rotation, right? We drew some data about, and we drew these calendars, and then we know certain things happen. Plants certain crops at certain times. So these are also human-derived sort of insights, or right, that we structure our lives upon,
or like a recipe, maybe in like a cookbook or something, or the instructions to assemble something.
Right, exactly. So these are still tools, right? So sometimes these are tools built by other humans that we follow, right? Algorithms are tools built by humans, but there's something else at work here that's a little different. And I think about this evolution of AI. We're still at this point. Like, okay, so I still get, I'm getting orders from an AI telling me to move, telling me to walk, telling me how far to run, right? So it's giving me sort of database decisions, or I won't say orders, but I'm carrying them out. So to some extent, it's an order, right? And if I don't carry them out, and it sends me negative feedback, it'll be like, oh, your health is dropping, T, but like, you're getting out of shape.
The next model will shock you, or like a little sharp pin will protrude from the watch.
Exactly. Just to get the same type of thing, right? You're getting a negative feedback and a positive feedback. I get like when I do the exercise, what I do what the AI wants, I get the positive feedback. So
it's kind of like Pavlovian conditioning or something.
Yeah, exactly. Right. No, this behavior is entirely behavioral principles applied, 100%. But I guess, like, I think also that's perhaps it makes sense with running. When I think of my work, I also wonder now if we're in this transitory step, because on the one hand, AI is not very intelligent. Like it's very good at patterns. It turns out that like patterns and probabilities can mimic intelligence, right? It looks and feels intelligent because it's able to trick us just by looking at how much of our society and our lives are governed by pattern, right? Like even your podcast has a certain structure to it, right? Introductions, and so the AI will pick up on that. Our conversation, like there's just all these patterns in society that it does a very good job at picking up on. And we also need them too, right? Imagine if things weren't structured and you just have random information, it wouldn't work for communication for society, right? So by its nature, our communication is structured, our language is structured, our societies are structured in predictable ways that AI can then pick up on and mimic and look like intelligence. I think, the next sort of part of it that's sort of astounding is taking us out of the loop. And then you have the next phase of AI now is agents. So what they're doing now, and it's absolutely fascinating. What if you start giving the AI the ability to spin up other AI? So different AIs are specializing in different things. Like you might have AIs that are really good at coding, AIs that are really good at text, AIs that are really good at video, AIs, right? And then you can have an AI where you say, look, hey, AI, I want to build this complex project. Can you do it? The AI will say, okay, great. And these models, they get run up. And then this one says, okay, I'm going to need to then spin an agent or an AI to handle the database. I'm going to spin up another agent to check the coding of that AI. I'm going to have another AI prepare the front end, the code for the front end of it. I'm going to have another AI make a video pitching, and it starts, so all of a sudden you have an AI that's in a management position, sort of deciding.
Like a meta AI, right? Or
like a meta AI. And then it's amazing because you can see it in real time. So you launch your task, and then it sends out all these other agents, the other sort of AIs, and they even supervise each other. Like they'll even say, oh, that code needs correcting. This isn't working. And then it'll correct. Or that video isn't quite right. I'm going to fix it. So the AI supervises another AI, if you will, agent. And it's actually astounding. I had developers say that they could do in one day that took them 2 years to do, right? And you can it's just astounding. And then now the humans are out of the loop.
Yes.
Now, it's still not. I still put a lot of effort into making AI outputs what I want, but it's still astounding, right? And that sort of that human intervention in the process being removed is interesting. And it's not that it's particularly intelligent. It's just that we're, I guess, very predictable, I think is the story here.
Yeah. Well, let's pause at that point of the patternedness, the predictability of human life, and with this, the tendency and sort of the trajectory whereby humans are getting cut out of the loop of these tasks. And maybe those converge. And I think that's a great characterization of the frontier of AI where we live it now. And maybe a philosophical or ethical question you can ask on each side is like, to what extent are we comfortable with this? To what extent does this benefit humans, or do we want this to continue to go in society? And to what extent do we not? Because it's like in both sides, the genie is out of the bottle or the cat is out of the bag. And so first with pattern recognition, I really like that idea that, I think all of nature is patterned. And, there's a lot of philosophers through history, Spinoza, Hegel, and others who think, that like logic and patterns are built into nature itself. And then humans are natural ourselves. And so, of course, everything we do is patterned. Those views, it's hard to find a place for, say, free will or spontaneity. I guess that's one question. But if let's say you're not bothered by that, and you just accept that all of nature is patterns that we can follow, or that have different degrees of, complexity, like quantum patterns might, be, indeterminate, but nonetheless, there's patterns that intelligence can pick up on. Then if AI in the form of pattern recognition and using huge data sets and predictive analytics and stuff, like what the large language models do, but I think also what the image generators do. It's just a way of reading language sets and predicting what would be the next step to fulfill this task based on the patterns that exist. So that's kind of a wild thing. Do you accept that everything is just pattern? And one implication of that is then, well, is there anything to human life other than patterned? Just plain out patterns that are ultimately predictable. It's kind of like to say that there's already a script for your life. There's a pattern there that you're going to fulfill. Or is there, it's like, is there freedom? Is there something that humans can do that isn't determined by a pattern? And maybe that's also to say then that AI poet, the AI philosopher, the AI human, and there are examples of these already, like chatbots that, they can write brilliant things, but is there some spark of something else that the human adds to their work or what they do that isn't just a matter of following out patterns, and therefore that AI can't replicate? Maybe not.
True innovation. True innovation, right? Can right? Like, because in theory, if you're just recognizing patterns and applying them, you can never innovate. And that's actually one of the big fears, right? Is actually, so as you get AI that's trained, so I think the term is decoherence. Current systems of AI are trained on, I think it's decoherent. I could be getting the term mixed up. But right? So as more and more AI generated material gets in there, then more and more AIs get trained on AI material.
Yes,
right?
Yes.
And then more and more gets on second. So all of a sudden, no longer the AI is being trained on human material, but AI generated material. And that leads to sort of like does that remove the sort of the diversity, right? The amount, the variability in what it generates, because it's no longer getting fed large, like random patterns, or not random, like larger scopes of language, larger scopes, right? It's
getting like an increasingly homogenous soup.
Exactly. Yeah. Like English is all going to be American English because the AIs are trained on it, right? So there are different countries are saying, wait a second, we need chatbots that are based on our particular dialects and our particular cultures, right? But that's just one example. But in the sense that it's become very homogenous, less variable, and then can it innovate, right? And it can make music, and it can make images, and it can make a great podcast, I bet. We can take your voice. In fact, it's really good at I could take your recorded podcasts and make a recorded Dave and automate. And that, in fact, we see it a lot of YouTube channels without the face. That's what they are.
Exactly.
Right? You can't even tell anymore.
Bastards. Yeah.
But I'm not sure it's bastards. Yeah. It's interesting. I consume AI produced media on the regular, and I truthfully don't dislike it, right?
Okay, well I guess that's a. Or do you consume AI generated music too? It's like what do you get out of these? That's maybe it's also because I'm producing YouTube content, and it's like to start like a philosophy YouTube channel as like a real human being. There's where you see the ones that do the best are these with AI generated images, like kind of a cartoon spool of images, and then AI generated text read by like a AI British guy voice. And they're catered towards 18-year-old nihilists or whatever, and then so it's like there's almost like a resentment, like if the zone gets flooded with this stuff, what does it do to independent producers? You could see that with music and all that stuff, but maybe the flood is inevitable. And to spin that back around, it's like if the end user gets benefit out of it, it's like, who's to say what is actually the better? What are we actually serving with these arts?
Can it innovate, right? My question is are we just going to do the same, right?
Can it be an artist?
On one hand, is it going to be the same type of, everything looks the same, right? The same homogeneity, and then we don't progress in terms of new musics and new styles of YouTube channel, or this sort of, because I think what drives a lot of a culture interesting is something new, right? Someone does something new and we say that's interesting. Or maybe we don't. Maybe we just rehash, right? Bell bottoms come back and And
Mm-hmm.
people talk about a weird period in the 90s where Gregorian chant was popular. Like we have these sort of, so maybe rehashing it
I
is
loved that
what,
period when I was a kid. That was very
yeah,
formative.
I was,
Yeah.
I discovered Carmina
Mm-hmm.
Burana. Okay. But yeah, like there's like maybe rehashing what we do anyways,
Mm-hmm.
recycle a lot with what's new, but I don't
Yeah.
know. I guess sort of the question is it just going to
Mm-hmm.
the end of innovation, right? Or a lot less frequent innovation
Mm-hmm.
because we're relying on AI for all this content all the time.
Well, it depends. I mean, it does fall back on the question of what is innovation, and is it, what does it mean when we innovate, even as as human beings? And maybe like it might be somewhat cynical to say, but again, if you take like the view that everything's already fully patterned anyway, and maybe that there isn't, that free will is an illusion, and that like there's no such thing as kind of genius and things, or like some sort of spontaneous like creative innovator who's like lodged in your mind, this kind of romantic idea that it's like, if you that on that view, it's kind of like it's nobody ever innovates. All that happens is a pattern repeats, but maybe there's accident or mutation. Like time and history change, and the context of human life changes every second, right? So it's like even if the same pattern, the bell bottoms now in the 2020s, all that intervening other substance of history just distorts it, so that now of course it'll be something new. So it's almost like that. No pattern can stay constant over time, because it's always manifested in a different particular moment and context, which by definition is new in comparison to the old. But it's not new because there was like some free ability, like some free will lodged in the staticness of nature, who decided, oh, now we're going to innovate. But it's new because like mutation and chance. So I guess there one question might be, does AI, can it even take chances or have accidents? Like maybe not. I don't know. I mean, I guess there's always still human error built into there. But let me back up. Okay, here's the question. Then the second question was about the human being cut out. So this, and if the problem with that or whatnot. So it seems in certain, you identified the space with coding, how it's like, there's like AI systems where different agents are created to run different tasks and can complete multiple tasks. This like sort of derived model of governance inside, they can delegate
I use
tasks.
Coding. Yeah, I use coding because it's pretty complex, right? And it's technical, but it's not just coding, right? I can tell agents, I can spin agents to do research for me, to prepare reports, to proof check other like you spin the agents and it sort of runs off, and that's the direction it's going, right? Like ChatGPT is going to be an old thing in a little while. It's going to it's going to be a lot. The agents are going to leverage ChatGPT and other technologies, and other LLMs and other types of deep learning and NLPs, natural learning processing, large. And anyways, the point is, there's a whole lot of different algorithms out there that you can leverage with agents, specific tasks, and that's the way it's going. And it looks different than what we think of now as a cutting edge of AI. They'll be on your computers, right? You'll say, all right, write me, computer agent, right? Write me an email, send it to these three people, right? Like I want to have this content in it. Include a photo from my recent travels, and done, right?
Yeah. Well, let me then, like, what's your view of like the good and the bad of this, and what we should be focusing on, and what maybe needs regulation or not? And one example might be, well, there's like the example, let's say if it improves your workspace as like an independent worker, it's like it's added to the Google Suite, this delegated or this like more complex AI. That sounds kind of good. Like, who wouldn't want that? Increases productivity. But what if it's the case that system combined with robotics, like replaces all the employees at McDonald's, because the whole agency of a McDonald's can be dehumanized, or any number of other spaces throughout the economy. Inevitably, that also, this automation, it kind of connects with the automation of workflows of production. So there's like it seems that we may be on the verge of like a mass. If that's the direction it continues to go, I mean, there's all the already autonomous taxis and trucks, in many spaces. Like there's a number of places where you can point out, it's like where it's convenient for the actual human to no longer be involved, that's where it's going. So what do you think of those trends?
Yeah, but you don't want your taxi, your truck to innovate, right? So it works well in the sense like you really don't want all of a sudden to try something new, right? You want your taxi and your truck to be predictable. You want it to be like, oh, like let's see what happens if I, drive on the left hand side of a right. Like you don't want innovation in those things. So that's why it works, right? And the really complex problems to solve in terms of all these data. So it's well, in some ways it's well suited for AI. It's quite complex, right? To do good, like it's one thing to drive in good weather conditions and perfectly delineated roads. It's a whole other thing to drive in the real world. So it's still a very difficult thing to do. And so, humans tend to outperform AI in non-optimized conditions. But I think we'll get there because we don't want innovation. I think with types of work that I work in, sometimes there's a routine aspect where you don't want there are particular ways of communicating certain things. For example, if you're writing a journal article, there's a particular style. You're not going to reinvent it. You can try, it's going to get rejected, right? There's very strong, templates and structures and ways of writing and expectations that excel in that routine day-to-day work that AI is very good at. It's not so good at, I guess, another way of thinking of innovation of opportunity, right? So a lot of what I do is, what is an opportunity? What is something that has to be done proactively? What is, so for example, like now is the time to propose certain initiatives or certain programs or take certain actions. And the AI can't do that just yet. Because there's a sort of, I don't want to say a gut feeling, but you're able to do a really large environmental scan, which sounds like something an AI should be good at, but that's really saying like you can judge the politics, the landscape, societal landscape. You can sort of make a judgment call on everything and think, I think this will work. And you're not necessarily able to assign a probability. And that's something that an AI doesn't do yet. And I think it would be hard for it to do just because it involves a human judgment that's not there. At the same time, I think we can think about, I think I mentioned on our last time we spoke, I'm not sure, I can't remember if I made it to the cut. I was reading the book Noise by Daniel Kahneman. And one of the arguments in there is like, and something I've taken as well, is say like there's a lot of variability in certain things like judgments. So you go to a court, you get a judgment, and sometimes judges faced with the same set of facts will have very different sentencing. And so that's not good, right?
Yeah, that inconsistency. You want judgment to be so equal, universal, predictable, fair.
Exactly. Right. Presumably the same judge, right? Should render the same judgments in the same circumstances. If you don't, then you have noise. And it could be different. Bias is when it's like always trending toward the same direction, but noise is like, it's like a random, right? So if you just even if you just sort of took out areas that we know to be biased, like if you just looked at a segment of men, white men, cisgender, right? Or even within those sort of categories to sort of try to limit the bias, right? You'll still have this noise. And so why not use an AI, right? Some people say, well, why, wouldn't AI be perfectly, imagine you had algorithms that were able to soak in significantly more information than a judge and consistently render then the same judgments. And then you could have and it could ask questions, and AI can ask questions, collect more data, and then even interestingly, if you had this, then you might also not necessarily need lawyers to the same extent, right? You would have, so that's one aspect of, of course, lawyers are horrified by this. I talked to lawyer friends about this, and they're absolutely horrified by this prospect. I can't tell if it's self-serving. And also this sort of,
it'd be very sad. I think there'd be a lot of tears shed if the lawyering industry collapsed. And
imagine you had AI judges able to process way more data than a human brain, right?
Yeah, and kind of litigate it as it went, right? Because in a certain sense, if it's kind of being objective, it's taking in both sides, it's constructing what is fairness if not being open to all possible bits of information and evidence and blending those together into an accurate judgment. And an accurate judgment is one that's balanced and fair. So if you look at it that way, you could say, that would be superior. But that puts so much trust, right? That puts so much trust in that But maybe that's where we're going, Big Brother, right?
But is it Big Brother? You could also, like, I think the current, so a lot of people have said a lot of discomfort with these black boxes. Like inputs go in, outputs come out, and then something happens in the middle there, and we don't really know what, right? And so that criticism has been heard. The other step that's being done in a lot of AI algorithms is trying to expand interpretability. To provide more clarity on the logic that led to the output. So connecting that input to the output, and so sort of providing the understanding of why a certain output was given. So one could envisage, right, an AI judge, right, sort of going through the steps of how they rendered a certain judgment. It's not, so it doesn't have to necessarily be a black box. One could say that you could make it in some ways clear, right, when they render a verdict, and they can cite the precedents and the laws and the evidence that was key. And I mean, I don't know how it would work exactly, but that's certainly the next phase: agents and interpretability, so that it's not just right something happened and we don't really understand the logic. So are they, but at the same time, right, I'm going on the positive sides here. You've asked on the other sides is it is difficult sometimes to really understand, particularly when you're going into what's called non-supervised learning. So you have supervised learning where you basically feed an algorithm data that you've chosen. And I might take a data, for example, and highlight, like, this is an example of this thing, and this is an example of this thing, and this is not an example of that. So if I'm using imagery, I can say, this is a cat. This is not a cat, right?
That's a pig.
This is a pig, right? And then you can keep feeding images, and then the algorithm will figure it out. You can also have what's called non-supervised learning, where you sort of let the AI train itself. One example, and
kind of crawl any database that it has access to. Kind of, it's seeking out then its own examples.
Exactly. Sometimes they use what are called diffusion models, where they'll take an image of a cat, and then they'll just gradually put more and more static, and then until the point where the AI says, this is a cat, and they won't recognize what it is anymore, and then it tries to learn how to go take steps backwards to see, okay, how do I recognize with this increasing static? How can I take steps back to take out that static and recognize it's a cat? So it can teach itself to recognize things in difficult situations. So if you have, because in real life, we don't often have perfect images of things. So you can have AI teach to deal with, bad imagery, clouds, whatever it is, by having it, get images and then train itself regressively by making the image worse and worse and worse, putting random static, and then reverting to, this was a cat here, now it's a static image. At what point can I stop recognizing that this is a cat? But it learns basically to see objects in very difficult situations. So practical utilities are like if you have Google lenses, right? And you don't look at a cat at the perfect angle in the perfect way, can it still recognize it's a cat? Well, this is how you train it, right? By basically obfuscating the object and then having it learn to deobfuscate, right? Automatically.
So you kind of like alienate it bit by bit or so, or like I'll put it into that gray zone of where it's okay. Now it's on you to determine and make, kind of feel out what's done next. We're not going to supervise you in the sense that now it's on you. So would you say then by implication? So let's address this and then we can take a quick break. But like what's problematic about that? If that unsupervisedness, is that mean because if the AI is not supervised, they'll go to the kitchen and get your knife and then come back exactly.
It's like think of an algorithm as a baby or a toddler. Would you put a toddler in your kitchen with everything unlocked, right? Like with the knives, and what is that toddler going to learn? And so that's when you have this sort of unsupervised learning, and also what is it basing it on, right? It's like these cases of where the AIs took these shortcuts and just adopted racist and sexist parts of humanity, right? And said, okay, imagine that judge says, okay, I process the training data automatically on cases of the United States. and it says, it automatically gives people of color stiffer sentences or less lenient sentencing for people of color, right, than people who are not of color, right? So, or in Canada would be Indigenous folk. Indigenous communities are disproportionately given harsher sentences. So, right, it learns from, so the training data, when supervised, maybe you can curate your training data, what you teach, just as you do with a child, right? The problem is it's very intensive, right? You have to have, just with a child, you have years of schooling to form that child's mind, right? Teach it right from wrong, good from bad, or teach them, excuse me. But an AI, right? It's so intensive and for humans to build and curate these training data sets that you much prefer to have an automated aspect where you can release as much automatic learning as you can, because you can then have much larger data fed into it. Like in these, these LLMs with natural language processing, you can feed them lots and lots of data, but you're not curating it. So you don't really know what you're teaching it. And I think the other part is the sort of question is, at what point does it become more intensive to make good AI than to just do it yourself, right? Like, so also this other point is you can train AIs and you can hire people to annotate data, to basically produce the training data manually, whether it's this is cat, this is pig, this is a cat with a hat, this is a pig with a hat, this is a pig with no hat. So you can have people annotate the data, which is very tedious. And then you can to train the AI to do simple tasks. But at a certain point, the human hours into training that AI and perfecting it and getting it to where it's significantly more.
And all the energy use as well, right? I mean,
the energy use, right? It's like, does it make sense? Just because you can't, and now it's like AI is this magic term. Everybody wants AI. Everybody wants AI everywhere because it's viewed as this panacea to increase productivity and fire people, right? And increase profits. And so,
and to entertain, I mean, that shouldn't be forgotten. It's like people, some of these areas where it's like blossoming the most is just people are dazzled and mesmerized by it.
For sure. And does it but at the same time, you're getting, it still requires a lot of other types of jobs. So what you sort of done is just diverted, right? You've diverted jobs from, say, writing those emails and doing some simple tasks, but then you're just allocating them to those who are annotating training data and doing the infrastructure. And it's not necessarily, I would say, cost or environmentally effective in some cases, and perhaps a lot of cases, right? Also, there's sort of the beauty of AI in a lot of cases is, getting to 85%, because let's just say that like a lot of what we do is patterned. And so, and maybe let's just say there's 85% very predictable or 90% very predictable, and then 10% that's less predictable and less patterned. Well, you can use that AI to get to that 85, and then you still need that human to do the 10 or 15%, right? So, and it's usually pretty easy to get to that 85. It's that last 15 or 10% that represents a significant part of the effort. So if you're trying to do a completely automated system, right, you cannot have 85% or 90% accuracy, right? And getting to that 99% accuracy or 95% or 96, getting that human level of accuracy and then higher requires so much investment and effort, just so you can take a human out. Whereas getting to that 85% of AI and then having human in the loop often makes a lot more sense, because it doesn't cost as much to produce that type of model. It doesn't have to be perfect, right? Because you still have humans really making the decision and correcting it. And that tends to be how at least I use it all the time. It'll take me 80% of the way, 65, right? Somewhere. It's hard to get the percentage, but it'll reduce my workload, but it'll also produce a lot of junk, right? I'll have to take out, but it'll save me a couple hours. I'll give you a concrete example. Like as a university prof, I have all my lectures recorded, automatically produce transcripts. I have all my quizzes. I have all my readings. Everything I can feed it into the AI and say, give me 50 multiple choice questions from all these data. And then from there, I'll pare it down to 25 and improve it. So it'll give me, 50 multiple choice questions from your entire course content from 12 weeks of 3-hour lectures. It's a lot of work, right? But I can use the AI, feed it everything, and it'll and make sure I'll be like, make sure you have at least 3 questions from every week, and give it some more parameters. Give it me 5 multiple choice questions, and then it'll output me 50 questions. I'll cut it down to 25. It'll require a lot of work, and then it'll make silly mistakes, like every right answer will be the longest one. Well, okay, well but I can do it would have taken 10 hours. I can do it in the span of 2 or 1.5.
Yeah. And I guess that's it's like that, I think that's a good example where that seems like a good test case or like a use case that is like seems ethical. It benefits you. It arguably benefits the students because then you can focus on other things. There's like no, and like that seems to be a space where we could say, okay, the use of AI here is good, and we want to promote this and allow for this and allow this to develop. But in the educational environment, then as soon as it's the case, well, if a student writes their paper with AI assistance or through AI, or if, as I just saw a study last week, a lot of faculty members themselves use AI to write research papers and grant proposals and things, or just that's now been established that it's in the realm of higher ed and of research, it's not, just on the student side. So at what point then, and these are works that people sign their name to. These are works that are supposed to represent their own thought process somehow, or their own human contribution. And if AI can do all that and is doing that, I guess that's another philosophical question for me. It's like, what are we even doing? Should we be adapting our higher ed environments and our research environments so that this can't happen? Or should we just accept that maybe not, we should, if we want to promote good science and good research and good, that would go for, all interdisciplinary type of research and what it means to, whatever happens at a university, that the AI shouldn't just write our multiple choice exams, but should, design the entire courses, should, produce the research outputs, should educate the students, should, run the lab. So, and maybe all we need at the university is just like 1 or 2 super high level intelligent administrators, just who are kind of overseeing it but maybe they're brilliant or so. And it's just like they could basically do it all.
The AI, let the AI do the administration.
Yes. That's yeah. Automate an AI.
I flip it around. But look, it makes no sense to keep students from using AI because they're going to go to the workforce and they're going to be expected to know these tools. I think the future is split between those who use AI, who can use and leverage AI tools, and those who can't. Right? And we're doing our students a disservice if you're saying, oh, no, don't I tell my students, use AI, but use it well. And AI will not do well on a lot of these tasks if you tell it to. So I think AI does a very good job in my assignments in terms of improving language. Like I have 0 patience for bad writing now. There's no excuse. Like already before when you had grammar and spell check, that was but now with AI, like you better your paper better be really well written because I have 0 tolerance when you can run it through an AI and improve its writing. But it doesn't do a good job at delivering the specific content. Like if I ask it, hey, write me a paper on, on this aspect, it'll often give me really general information. It lacks specificity and precision. And you can immediately, and it cannot deliver, or often students aren't able to use it to deliver within the parameters that I want. And so the student who doesn't put enough effort. I say lazy, but maybe other reason they couldn't, but who don't put the effort in and they'll say, hey, write me a paper, copy and paste my questions in there. And you see the type of papers they turn in, they'll get it maybe a 50, maybe a C plus or a C minus sometimes a D. Like they get very low grades if passing at all sometimes. And it's a fail if they don't cite it. If you like, I make it clear, you can use it. You have to tell me how you used it. if it's clear you have used it and you haven't cited it, well, that's plagiarism to me. Like, you know, but as long as you cite it, and you should, and you use it well, it's great. I can smell an AI paper handed in because I work so much with it. I can smell it immediately. And my TAs, my teaching assistants, they can tell too now, because we're all getting very used to it, and because that's, you know. But when you do it right and you use it to improve what you've done, like I write out proposals now and papers very quickly because I can not worry about the language and the formatting. You know, I can give it a structure. Here's the structure, and there's bullet point, free thought, typos, spelling mistakes, and then plug that into the AI and get a first draft very quickly.
Yes. And that's polished and already a bit filled out and such. Yeah.
Yeah, and then I can work on that. It has all my ideas, you know, and then I can work on that first draft and get a final draft much more quickly than if I have to do it manually. So it increases my productivity immensely. But again, the ideas, the content, and the structure is given by me. You know, and that's the part there where you really see the difference. When you try to just have full content created by AI, I find it does struggle to perform, you know, to perform well.
Yes. Yeah. Well, and I guess, you know, it's also just like a matter of time. Like, we're recording this in like early summer 2025. And if somebody were to listen to this 5-10 years from now, it could be that the state of the technology has changed so much that it's almost, you know, it's like now the AI can't write a research paper that can fool you, you know. And I think, and I've encountered this as well as a teacher, and then even just like, you know, trying to write a research article and sit down, because those require you to have a narrow specialization, a control of a certain literature. There's humans on the other side of the journal who are reading it and who are looking for kind of you to demonstrate your competency with this niche thing. And I don't think that as far as I can see, I haven't seen examples where the AI can kind of get past those human barriers of people who are carefully looking, but maybe it will. And one flip question I have here to put to you, it's like, but again, that's like a test case, like, especially like a research article, if you're outlining it, or a grant proposal, nobody's like splitting hairs. Like, that's not supposed to be much of a human document anyway. It's like a conveyance. Like, people hate writing them, they hate reading them. But what about when it comes to poetry or a song or so, or a novel? You know, it's like, at what point is it, okay, like I have a great idea for a novel. I'm going to ask AI to write it for me, and then I'm going to proofread what it's written, and maybe I'll add a preface, and you know, then I'll post it as my own and things. And I'm sure that's happened many times already and things. So but that feels like a usage that's something was lost. Like, that novel is in an important sense, not that person's novel, I guess. But maybe it's raising for me, it's like how arbitrary this is with the standards we hold for arts. But I guess there's like a balance. When is the line drawn? Whereas, you know, is AI poetry, can that even exist? You know, like, because I feel like to flip this around, like, at what point does it, like, the soul of what we do get sucked out of it? Like, there's already not soul in grant proposal writing, you know, but like these other things.
Fair. And I think that's, you know, I think that's a fair question. I guess the question is, how does it make you feel when you read it? And can AI make us feel the same way another human can? And you could say no. I think for me, at some point, it's that, like, I'm sure you can use it to write a compelling novel, and compelling poetry. I'm not sure how it does on the evoking the emotion. Like, does it have an understanding of the human condition to make you feel the same way? Like, maybe it can generate excellent sounding generic content that we sometimes like, right? Like, everybody has some, well, not everybody, many people, right, have some sort of popular, you know, what my grandparents might have called vulgar, you know, culture that they might enjoy ingesting. But I think what
not me, Thibaut. No, all my culture is very, very sanitized and modest. So, speak for yourself. Yes.
Indeed, right? Yeah, but like that innovation part, I think again, I think that's what we miss, right? Like, I think maybe it can generate poetry that sounds like the poetry I would write. I'm not a poet. Like, I know you write poetry, Dave, sometimes, and you have, but I could probably, like, my poetry, not a lot of experience. Maybe it would probably sound pretty uninspired, which I think would be probably what a AI could replicate. But I like to think that the sort of the art that innovates, right? The art that is different, that stands out. I don't know if it could do that. It seems to me it would just be like part of that average mush, right? I'm sure I can give me a great recipe for some really nice dishes, but I'm sure it won't be the Michelin starred dish, it won't be that, or that, not even Michelin, but it won't be that sort of dish that wow, you'll remember in 5 years. It might be, I'm sure it can make great poetry, but you probably you'll forget it within a couple of years or within a couple of days. It might make a great book.
Maybe, yeah. I mean, I think that's, yeah, I like that spin. That seems pretty optimistic as well, that there's like, it's still discernible, like the human touch in a way. But I wonder, I mean, we could do this experiment, like if we found like some inspiring human written poetry that we do know that evokes these emotions, like very well-regarded poetry or just effective stuff. And then we get some AI poetry and print it. That's kind of like designed to be somewhat similar. And then we get a test of 10 people and they read both, and we do a blind sampling and things. What if it does turn out that the AI stuff has evoked, like there's no way to pick up a discernible human difference? So maybe that wouldn't happen just because there's some secret sauce that the human puts in there. But if that could happen, and if it's then a matter, at least for all the readers, the experience, and it's like, this is coming with films right now, just this technology, just these last months, these film production tools of, so it's like, could an AI film win an Oscar? Could an AI artist win Album of the Year? Could, the next great philosophical treatise be written by an AI mind? Like, is that coming? And right now, it at least seems conceivable. And then we'd have to ask, well, do we want to regulate things so that there's still a space for those human beings to do their stuff? But if the Pepsi challenge is that still for the public, they can't tell the difference and they might even prefer, maybe the AI film is so emotionally resonant and powerful that, there's not a dry eye in the audience and we have to award this, it's like, maybe it'll become superior.
Yeah. I mean, I'm sure you could feed it the scripts of all the Oscar winners, right, in the last 50 years, and all the other scripts too that weren't Oscar worthy, and say, write me an Oscar worthy film, and it will come up with something. But it might also be very cliched. It might also, but it might be able, because perhaps there's a pattern to winning Oscars. Maybe it'll say, give gifts to these. Maybe it'll put some strategy. To whom do I need to give gifts of watches, and what venues what type of communication strategy do I need? Right. I think Oscar winning is often not only quality of film, but a lot of communication strategy, and it can probably tell you, like, what gifts to give at what events, and where to send your actors to talk at what venues. But like, can it, again, it's that novelty. I think humans like novelty. I think we tire quickly of this, no matter how good it is, right? I'm sure you can, you innovate a new type of music, and the AI then learns and then will replicate that. Or, but being that first mover, that first person, I think the AI cannot do that in a good way. It doesn't know how to innovate and be novel. And I think we tire of the same mush. With the same much we consume, we do need to consume, I think, a certain amount of it. Sometimes there's something, I think we live in a very anxious period of time, and there's something about these patterns and this routine that is soothing, right? Like, we like eating the food of our parents. Even if it's us, it's amazing, right? Our mom or dad's cooking, right, is amazing to us because there's a routine to it that brings us comfort, and there's a reliability and pattern to it.
It's a nourishing gruel. It's
nourishing gruel, exactly, right? And so I think we also have a limited amount of novelty we can consume, and particularly when we have so much happening, we feel overwhelmed. So I think AI actually is going to be pretty good at that sort of routine. But we also on the flip side, I think not enough novelty also is burdensome on us. And I think AI doesn't do well on that novelty and innovation. And I think that's where the humans have to come in, and perhaps it'll push us, right? Like maybe our role is going to be not to produce drivel, right? But to produce, as humans, new, exciting, innovative things.
Yeah. One can hope. One can hope. So, well, let's pivot now. We have a few more minutes, and I want to hear your recommendations. Speaking of novel, interesting human. I don't know if all your recommendations involve human produced works or not, but yeah. What do you got?
I don't know. I mean,
book, film, album, mix and match, whatever you got. Anything else?
Clothing. That's what Rex is. What I'm doing right now. Right now, I'm usually what I'm doing with my kiddo. So we're currently. It was a gift at Christmas that was given to us. We're currently going through Stephen Hawking's A Brief History of Time, illustrated edition.
Was it illustrated by Hawking before he passed away?
Yeah.
No.
I'm not sure. Although I was reading about his second wife and the abuse allegations. It was pretty horrific.
Okay.
Anyways, it's not in the book but it's interesting. It is truth losing me a little bit at certain It goes well beyond high school physics, and I feel betrayed by my high school science and physics classes because it's like, wait a second, like we knew this already back then, already in the 90s. We had better ideas of quantum and also subatomic particles, but we sort of taught the physics of the 1950s, the 1990s, and didn't really go beyond because it was just viewed as too complex. But
yes, and then we're ill prepared to actually grasp reality at that point. Nowadays, right, Thibaut?
Exactly, right. And it's like, well, and so because of that, because I could sort of follow up to where my science courses went into high school, and perhaps also I took a couple in university, but I can't go really. Now I'm struggling with the beyond that education. We're talking about spins of subatomic particles that are coded to colors, and I'm like so I have to reread it multiple times, but I am enjoying it and learning a lot, and I must already be outdated given when it was published. So it's probably no longer accurate, but I think it's interesting, and certainly it's written in as accessible, I think, as it can get. It's a good example of good science communication of at times very complex subjects. Wonderful. So and the illustrations are nice. And it's sort of cool to have like 5, 6, and 7 well, now he's 7. We don't read it all the time. We read sort of sections at a time, and sometimes we read certain sections, but it's sort of
bits
neat,
and pieces. Yeah.
Like my kid understands things like redshift and the Doppler effect. And it's sort of neat. Like we were out in nature, we were out at a museum, and he was like, he was telling people all about the Doppler effect and explaining it. And so that's sort of neat.
Yes, totally. Yeah.
And I had
credit to good parenting, I think.
Yeah, or Stephen Hawking's good explainability of like sound waves and moving apart or near them or far away from them, sort of shaping the wave itself. Yeah, exactly. So I'm enjoying that. I think if I make a rec, something that's perhaps less read, I was thinking about what books my students have enjoyed reading in environmental politics. That were accessible and not too academic-y, if you will. And I guess I make a rec for books written by a scholar named Jennifer Clapp, CLAPP, from the University of Waterloo in Canada. Yeah, exactly. And she's interesting. She writes a lot about food politics and sustainability. She has a really interesting series of books and articles about toxic waste and the export of toxic waste internationally, and the treaties and the politics. So that's been a really great. That's a really great recommendation.
What's the book called, or is it an article? You can send it to me later. Yeah.
Toxic Export was 2001.
Okay.
That's the one that I've read a lot with students, although it's no longer entirely up to speed because there have been some changes in terms of the exporting of toxic waste, but the principles still remain, right? Essentially that there's entire systems designed to process the most toxic of our wastes in other countries, other jurisdictions.
Yes.
And then I don't really have a third one. I've been listening to a lot of punk with my kid.
Okay.
Yeah, we're in a punk phase. And
which sort of stuff, like Ramones or Sex Pistols, or more recent?
Yeah, we did Ramones, Sex
Skater
Pistols. I have to sort of be careful in terms of the appropriateness for a child. So we did some NoFX as well, but have to be a little careful. A little bit careful on the song selection. So that's sort of been the Ramon, Sex Pistols, and NoFX are the ones off the top of my head that he's been enjoying. But
Wonderful.
Yeah, and truthfully, I'm enjoying it too, rocking out. But the language has to be very carefully curated and moderated.
I hear you. You should try some like Spanish, Portuguese, or maybe German language punk, and then the language won't be an issue. It's just.
Although he has some understanding of Portuguese, so I got to be careful. German's a good idea.
There you go.
So I'm not sure if that's a recommendation, but I'm certainly having fun. I didn't expect him to be into it. That's a nice surprise, and we'll see. I'm sure we'll be in a different phase 6 months from now.
Yes, inevitably. Well, we'll have to check back in with you then, Thibaut, and see what you guys are listening to then. But for this summer of 2025, I think that's actually an excellent recommendation. So, all right. Well, then, Thibaut, thanks so much for joining us. I think this was a really cool chat. It's good to cover this material with you. And as usual, there's like more questions raised. So we'll have to pick things back up again. But I appreciate you being here and appreciate you in general. So thanks so much for joining us.
Thanks so much for having me, Dave. And maybe we need to see if we can generate an AI podcast of yours and sneak it in there. We should like ask AI to feed the AI your podcasts, and then ask it to generate one on any something random, and then see if your guests can identify which podcast is AI generated. That'd be my challenge to you if you want to do an empirical study.
I'm how do you know we haven't already started that? You listening and watching right now. Bleep, 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 bleep. Maybe this whole conversation, has been the first in that. But yeah, I think that's, I think you just invited yourself to contribute to the technical assistance of the podcast, Thibaut. So let's work.
Yeah, we can do a segment. we can do next time, or one of the segments can be an AI generated 5 minutes, and try to sneak it in and see if the listeners can identify.
Yes. I would love to ask, like DeepSeek about its views on mortality and things, and see what we get into there. So
maybe not DeepSeek, maybe not that one.
Yes, exactly. We'll find a Canadian AI, and that's what we'll go with. So, all right. Well,
thanks, Dave.
Thibaut, we'll see you soon, and everybody else, we'll see you for the next episode of. We hope you enjoyed this conversation with
Thibaut Hennen.
The Deadbeat Philosophy Podcast is a co-production of Deadbeat Media and the Museum Hegelhaus Stuttgart. For more Deadbeat content and to chip in to keep the channel going, check us out at deadbeatphilosophy.substack.com. For more about the Museum Hegelhaus, check out hegelhaus.de. That's HEGEL-HAUS.de. Adios and auf Wiedersehen.